Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I am so excited to have you here. We are interviewing somebody who is so interesting. His background is going to blow your mind. Andrew Hunzicker. He is an accountant. Now, before you say, hey, what's new about an accountant? We all know that we have to pay taxes, and who do we go to? Our accountants. But this accounting is very different. He now helps companies via marijuana manage their businesses correctly. It's a whole different genre, and he's going to tell us all about it. Andrew, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I would just tweak your one thing about what I'm doing. So I started that way, helping companies, dispensaries, and farms do their accounting. But at this point, I now teach almost 1,000 other accountants and CPAs how to help those companies. So I'm the guy that actually teaching the accountants. It's like I'm now 2 levels away from the farm or dispensary, but that's how I started.
I think it's wonderful. Actually, your background, it looks like you started in Oklahoma where you grew up, correct?
Yes.
And you once were an accountant with the oil and gas industry.
Yes. And so I kind of was on a traditional path in the 90s. I got my CPA, and then I worked at Big Four, actually both Price Waterhouse and Grant Thornton. And like many people, you get kind of trained in a niche. Mm-hmm. And then you end up going. And so I was doing some oil and gas at a client, and they offered me a CFO job in 2000. Literally the first day of the century was my first day. And I started there and ended up staying there for 10 years until we exited to a big S&P 500 company. But it was really fun. I did the school, then the training in Big Four, and then worked at a client. And so that's how we ended up in Oregon. When we sold our company, the oil and gas, we just said, hey, let's move to where we were vacationing at the time, Bend, Oregon. And we've been here ever since.
I was reading your website and it said that you were always a numbers guy. And I was like, wow, I'm the exact opposite. It's like numbers just don't make sense to me. I'm completely dyslexic. So you transitioned into the area of marijuana, which is somewhat controversial when people hear about it because it's not legal in all states, although I'm wondering if it will be at one point. What's your thought about that?
So a couple of things. Yeah, we moved to Oregon just because actually we were vacationing here. Bend, Oregon's a vacation town. And Oregon was one of the first 3 kind of legal medical states in the US. And so it was just really accidental. I knew somebody in town that had a lab that was actually just doing the testing of cannabis, and they needed help on a project. And so I kind of accidentally got involved. Next thing I knew, I was CFO of Hi-Fi Farms, which was Esquire magazine called us the coolest farm in cannabis about, I think it was in 2017. And so kind of accidentally fell into the niche, but I had the same concerns. I was like, should I be doing this? Is this a legal niche? And so I checked with our state board at the time of accountancy, and they're like, yes, you can serve this. Every state board has their own position. But since then, back in the days, I'd be stuck with an issue and I couldn't go to the Big Four or even small accounting firms that have 5 or 10 people. They'd say, oh, we don't do cannabis. We don't know about it. And so it was very much a struggle. And fast forward here just a few years, and even through, a lot of people think mistakenly this is a red-blue issue, and it's not. We just went through 4 years of a very, very red administration, and cannabis progressed in leaps and bounds. We're almost legal in 40 states already. We just had an election in November where 4 very red states passed cannabis reform. And we've now got the MORE Act passed the House in December. Schumer has just said one of his 4 areas of concern is passing marijuana legislation. So I think it's very, very likely that cannabis will be descheduled this year. That's my personal opinion.
Well, I think Colorado was the first state to legalize marijuana, and that became almost like a petri dish, right? We could observe what happened and what happens with marijuana when it's legalized. What did we learn from the first state that went legal?
Well, it was, again, very interesting. And it's funny, my 2 states, I'm Oregon's a pretty blue state. Oklahoma's a very red conservative state. Well, in 2012, when Colorado legalized, I don't know if you remember this, the state of Oklahoma sued the state of Colorado, which we've just heard about recently again, where states can sue each other. Well, they sued and lost Colorado. They said, how dare you legalize cannabis? 4 or 5 years later, Oklahoma overwhelmingly legalized cannabis. And in Oklahoma, it went from illegal to legal to essential last year during COVID. And now Forbes last year called Oklahoma the most cannabis friendly state in the nation, a very red state. And so it is a petri dish of like, wow, how could a state turn around so much? And you start looking at things like, well, it provides tax dollars to cities, counties, states, and the feds who are all broke. It provides jobs. It's COVID proof. It provides real medicine to people that need it and an alternative to the opiate crisis that we're having. So there's many, many reasons why this industry is moving forward. And it's a reason why 7 out of 10 Americans believe it should be legal.
Right. I mean, at the very least, it makes states very rich, and those dollars can be used to help the community and people who are suffering. So in that regard, it makes a lot of sense. How is accounting different in this very specific genre?
Well, it's in any niche you get into that's a little bit complex. It's, for example, oil and gas accounting is very complex. And you're like, why? Well, it's just very complex. The way
you're talking to somebody who like adding 5 and 2 is complex. I still count on my fingers.
It gets worse. And so the complexity around cannabis, here's a big problem. It's not just a niche. It's actually about 6 or 7 sub niches. We've got farming, we've got chemical processing, we've got product manufacturers, we've got distribution, we've got labs, and we've got retail. Every one of those has its own unique accounting quirks on its own, but all together, you may find all those different industries in one single company as your client. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with what seems like a mom and pop client here in Tiny Bend, Oregon, but they've got 12 legal entities. They've got a farm, 2 dispensaries. They're doing chemical processing. It all takes cost accounting. Cost accounting to an accountant, even the CPAs of the world, is like, it's like when you say the word calculus for math, it's like, that's the topic we didn't like in school. Same in accounting. Nobody liked cost accounting. It's hard and complex, and we've got to use it throughout the niche. And then on top of all that, we have a lack of tools and software to do this because this industry was built upside down in accounting. So instead of the big 4 training and creating industry guides and gap guidance, and it's the other way. We're learning kind of at the grassroots level, and the big 4 still isn't even in the space. So we don't have all that training and education.
So for somebody who is not knowledgeable about what the big 4 is, what is that?
So it used to be, it keeps getting smaller. It was the big, and I'm thinking back to the 70s, I think it was the big 8 with Arthur Anderson. It's not even here anymore. And then even big 6 when I started, and then Price Waterhouse bought out Coopers and Lybrand, which is now Price Waterhouse Coopers. And so these huge global accounting firms, there's now 4 of them left. And you've heard of them, probably Price Waterhouse Coopers, E&Y, Deloitte, and KPMG, global companies. And at this, again, 4 years ago, the accounting firm with 4 people in it wasn't in cannabis. At this point where we are today, most firms in most states are some way touching cannabis or CBD. Pretty much everybody except the big 4 is in it. And I'm guessing the big 4 will be here very quickly, just as the mainstream corporate world is going to be jumping in, whether it's Budweiser or Nike or Corona beer, they're all coming. And our pharmaceutical companies will be here in a big way. And that's great for us because when the pharmaceutical companies get involved, the quality of the CBD and the medical and the medicine is going to go up exponentially. And we actually have real science being tested now, finally.
One of the challenges of something or substance when it's not regulated is we see dangerous things can happen, or there's an inconsistency. So I'm wondering if legalization of marijuana helps it to be more of a stand-up, predictable product.
Yeah, that is a great point, and we really need to get there. And people, we all intuitively understand that. Again, go, I'm almost 60, but where we are on food, we all read labels in the store and we trust it. If it says organic, we actually think that's
Mhm.
organic. And if it says it's got 8 carbohydrates or whatever, we believe that stuff. So we're going to be there. FDA is going to be regulating CBD and cannabis both. And so if you go to buy a CBD product, you can trust that if it says this is pure CBD 10% or whatever, you can trust that it's true. Right
Yeah.
now, buyer beware, and CBD in particular. We
Mm.
actually, a lab client of mine, the FBI came to them a couple of years back and had them they pulled all these products from various states off the internet and whatnot. It was incredible how few of them actually had CBD in them at all, or
Mm.
in lower quantities, or had some THC. You certainly don't want to take CBD and all of a sudden get high from THC.
Yeah.
And so I am very excited as we get a little bit farther along to where we can actually, because I think CBD is a great product, but I don't want to buy CBD and have no idea if I can trust whether or not it's actually CBD.
Do you think this genre of accounting somehow encourages people to use marijuana in a way that might not be healthy or ideal?
So just because, yeah, maybe they see the accountants, we're all the nerdy introverts if we're doing it. um, I think so, but I use my mom as an example, is 83, and she's got arthritis and all
Yeah.
kinds of medical issues. And she is as anti-cannabis as you could ever be. But she's using CBD now. And so over time, you get these people slowly, like their doctors are saying, try this. The next step
Yeah.
is going to be, they're testing THC for everything from anxiety, depression, sleep disorder, pain, arthritis, all these issues that this aging America, including me, were having. And we now also know opiates is not the answer.
No.
Pain pills or Valiums or whatever. So we need a solution that as we get older that we can use. So I think, and luckily now we've got hospitals and universities doing all kinds of studies, and not just in the US, all over the world. So the science is coming. 20 years ago, it was just like, I remember my next door neighbor in the 70s smoking pot when she had cancer and she died. So they were using it back then for pain and
They
chemo,
were.
but we
They
had no
were.
science. It was, yeah.
I was just going to say that I used to work with Montel Williams, and
Okay.
he was a big, huge, and still is advocate of CBD. He has MS, and
Okay.
he's been backing this for years. He was really ahead of his time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I know about Montel, and whether it's Willie Nelson or many, many other celebrities as well, pushing this movement. And it's kind of, I tell people, like 8, 10 years ago, we were pushing this ball up the hill, and then we got to the top of the hill, and then it was rolling downhill. And now the boulder has fallen off the cliff, and it's like, get out of the way. There's nothing going to stop this movement.
No.
And it's good. It's actually good for us. Yeah. Are there going to be some bad things? Yes. And even we haven't even talked about social equity and getting people out of prison that shouldn't be there, and all that. Those
Yeah,
issues.
that's a really good point. So, what is going to happen to people who have sold marijuana, got caught, are in prison, and now those states are legal? What happens to those individuals?
They're starting, I don't have the stat in front of me, but there's already been a whole lot of people let out of jail, their records expunged. That's going to continue. Hopefully, we'll do that even on a national level. And
Mm-hmm.
then we don't want our police forces really wasting all their time,
Right.
chasing these people. And it is a race issue. It's just facts. The stats are the minorities and disadvantaged people are the ones that end up in jail. And
Mm.
so hopefully we'll get past that with the legalization. And it's not, legalization doesn't mean it's a free for all. It is regulated, and a lot of people don't get that around even CBD. They're like, this is being treated as a drug because it's being used as a drug. And
Right.
so FDA regulates all of our medicine. And so they're going
Mm-hmm.
to regulate it. There's going to be testing required, and they're going to have rules, et cetera. But their FDA is pretty behind as well right now. It's going to take some time. It's going to be very bumpy as this industry grows. And accountants are, by the way, a huge help in helping these companies do good accounting and tax. And it's not just about the tax return. There's a lot of investors in this industry, angel investors. It might be someone's rich uncle who's got a construction company, or hedge funds, whoever it is. Those investors want their capital protected. They want good accounting. They want good tax. And so we can do a lot to help that. And so that's kind of where my role comes in. I train the bookkeepers and CPAs and accountants how to actually do the GAAP, cost accounting, and tax right, so they can add value to their clients.
Let's get into the school, but before we get into the school that you're offering and providing online, and it's been very successful, one of the things you have said is that, for these businesses, if they don't have their accounting right, then their business fails when it comes to the marijuana business and CBD. And so that's really where you come in and the training process comes in. Tell me about your school. Who's eligible? I know I'm not, and I'm good with that, but who is, and how accountants can find you or determine whether this is the right path for them?
Okay, well, great. I'll just kind of start at that end on, so dopecfo.com. You can find a ton of information, including our blogs and about the programs. And even, if you're just interested, what do I need to think about as an accountant? But we serve kind of the broad. We've got CPAs, which are certified public accountants, lots of them. We've enrolled agents. They're actually enrolled agents for the IRS, but they do a lot of tax work, so they love to join our program. And we have bookkeepers, of which there's many, many bookkeepers and accountants that maybe have a couple of accounting classes or an accounting degree, but they don't actually have their CPA license. They can still help and serve in cannabis. So we teach a pretty broad group of people, and even some MBAs and Masters of Business Administration and CFOs as well. And so what we're trying to do, and I speak to business owners as well around the country at events and whatnot, and we're trying to educate the business owners, first of all, the importance of doing accounting right. And whether there's many, many reasons why you want accounting right. First and foremost, you can manage your business better. So if you don't know how much it costs to grow a pound of weed, in your field, you can't manage your business, but you can also, it gives you easier access to capital. You can survive an audit better. You can improve your cash flow. You can do your tax return right. These all will add value to your company as you grow towards exit. And it's a little bit complex. So we tell the business owners how valuable it is to do this right. And by a side note on that, it's funny to ask a farmer, how much does it cost you to grow that pound of weed from that single plant? They're like, oh, it was free, because I clipped a clone. They call a clone, you can clip a leaf off a plant and stick it in a little pot with dirt. That cost me 5 cents. But actually that pot costs a lot, because it takes this full cycle to grow a plant, from planting to veg, then flower, then we harvest it, then we dry it, then we cure it, then we trim it, then we send it to the lab to be tested, then it comes back. 6 months later, we have to add in all these costs, rent and utilities and water and labor, that all goes into that plant. And so it didn't cost us 5 cents to get that. It cost us $1,000 or $1,200 to get that one plant.
And therein lies the beauty of an accountant, because you help the business owner see money where they might not, because they're just not thinking that way, or just they're minimizing it because it's just what they do. You also mentioned that there's something about this particular business where businesses are more vulnerable to getting audited. Is that still the case?
Yes, it's actually going to be much, much more. The IRS is ramping up in a big way, as are states. And the reason, it's big dollars. The IRS is pretty much winning every single case, and just a mom and pop small farm or whatever can easily be $500,000 fee into the IRS. And so they're going to be coming in a big way after this industry, which is going to mean you need to be doing accounting and tax correctly. And we tell people too, the capital required, any sub niche you pick. So say you want to open a farm, or say you want to just manufacture lotions and gummy bears, or maybe you want to process oil at a chemical plant, or maybe you want to open a dispensary chain. Those all take millions of dollars, and capital is very intense. Equipment, real estate, labor. And so these companies, not to mention the tax burden, are really struggling to cash flow, and we have lots of these companies go under, and so we show them, yeah, if we can help you manage and run the business and project cash flows, you can stay in business longer. You don't want to be the cannabis company that spends 4 million and goes under.
That might even be something to look into if people are investing in stocks when it comes to CBD. You know, what kind of accountants do they have working for them, and are they specialized in this area so that the business can survive?
Yes, that's a great point. And right now, most of the public companies are on the Canadian exchange because so if we deschedule marijuana, some of those companies can now do IPOs in the US, and they will, yes, need really good, because that's a whole nother layer of complexity on top of, but it always starts at the bottom. The base day-to-day cost accounting needs to be, we call it rock solid. It needs to be bulletproof, audit proof. We build a permanent audit trail every month. And that way, if my client here, it legalizes, say, in 6 months a farm, and all of a sudden, say Budweiser comes in and says, we want to buy that farm, they're going to send in the auditors and the due diligence teams. You're going to have to be ready, audit ready at that point. And so you don't want to wait till later. And many of them, unfortunately, are at this point. The accounting in the industry is still pretty messy because there just aren't enough CPAs and good accountants in the space.
So what makes your school and training program different from others that are out there?
Okay, so there's actually no other program like ours at all.
Oh, all right. Well, let's highlight that. Why am I always the last to know?
Really, the last to. So there are a couple of CPE, which is continuing education classes, where you can take a day seminar, take some classes, and learn about the tax code or whatever. But our program is actually, education is only one of 4 components. So we do have the actual full education. And when we say education, we're not just teaching you accounting and tax. We want you to be what we call a VIP in cannabis in 90 days. We want you to know the products, the brands, the software, the operations, how they're made, the accounting issues, the legal and politics. We want you to know everything so you can add more value to your clients. And then once that education, we're going to give you an actual toolbox. And so our program is not just education. There's over 100 tools you can use on day one to serve your clients: chart of accounts, engagement letters, PBC lists, cost accounting templates. And so I say it's a little bit like the analogy I can give you that you can maybe understand. And this is where I know nothing. If I drove over to Home Depot, and my wife tells me, by the way, to stay out of Home Depot because I'd have no business there. If I went over there and said, hey, I'm going to build a side patio for my wife, do you got a few videos to train me? And they're like, oh yeah, here's $100 set of videos. But while you're here, why don't you buy the hammers, the saws, the lumber, the workbenches, and all these tools, and you'll have the education and the tools to build the bench. And the tools are where I'm going to be spending a ton of money. That's very similar. So the tools that we built took me years actually to build, and hundreds of hours. And so that's the key thing, because you need those tools. Other niches have those tools. The reason we don't is the Big Four is not here. We don't have industry guides. And so they weren't created yet. So I created them for myself. And that old clause where people will beat a path to your doorstep, that happened to me. People literally, I'd get phone calls, Andrew, I'm in Georgia. I heard you had a chart of accounts. Can I buy it? And so that evolved into me training and teaching over the last 5 years, but that's kind of how it started.
I love it. We are going to have a link up so people can find you and sign up for your class if in fact it seems like the right path. I think colleges also should be educated as to, this specific kind of accounting. It seems to make sense since everybody is interested in the environment. And this seems to make sense in terms of being environmentally aware and economically aware and being, legally aware. You also are unique in the sense that you have a podcast called Dope CFO for Accountants.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'd have to even look at the actual name. I think it's called Dope CFO, maybe for cannabis. But if you Google it, you'll see that'll pop up as well. And we interview basically at this point the people in our program, the accountants all over the U.S. And so I think I've got 60 episodes now where we talk about what it's like to to be in the space.
Yeah.
And
Well, we're going to have a link up for that too, Andrew. Where can people find you so that, you know, you are the go-to name in this space? You are the ultimate expert. Where can people find your website?
well, luckily it's dopecfo.com. There's a contact button. Our email is be@dopecfo.com. And I'm very easy to reach and reachable, and I get back to everybody. And you made a great point too about the colleges and universities teaching this, because it is an interesting time. And I tell the accountants of today, this is a once in a lifetime event where we get a birth of a niche this massive. So it doesn't happen every day. Yeah, when oil was formed in the 50s, that was a birth of a niche. But so it's a very fun time. My niece, I just talked to my brother today. She's getting her CPA license in the summer, or taking the test. And I was like, what a great time to go into accounting.
Such a great time if you're not me, because I can't add. But listen, I'm going to stick in my lane, and I'm going to hire people like you, because I want the best and the brightest, and people who are very knowledgeable in a field that will help business. That seems to make sense. Andrew, you are a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and educating our audience about this very important topic.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I could talk all day about it.